Happy Pride Month. This is our first recording on Pride Month. Happy Pride Month. Black Lives Matter. Like a lot of people, shounen action is what initially introduced me to anime. I had seen episodes of Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Before I even really knew what anime was. And since then, I've seen an absolutely wondrous and wide variety of anime and have fallen even more in love with the medium. But I never lost my affection for all of the over-the-top action, crazy characters, and passion that shounen action provides, especially if there's a bit of an added kick. I'm Kalice, and I recommend Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba. Our very, very cold open is on a boy trudging through an incredibly snow-covered forest with his bleeding sister on his back. He's confused, but promises to save her. Jumping back in time a bit, we find out this boy's name is Tanjiro Kamado. Tanjiro lives with his loving and adorable family. His father passed away years ago, and he has since stepped up to help with the household. On this particular day, this includes traveling from their home in the wilderness into a nearby town to sell charcoal. Since Tanjiro is such a good boy, he spends time helping people out around town, and winds up heading back towards his family as night approaches. On his way home, an old man insists that he stay the night to be safe, as demons roam after dark. Tanjiro asks if the demons can't come inside. The old man says that they absolutely can, which is fucking horrifying as far as I'm concerned, and that the demon slayers exist to deal with this problem. If I'm being nitpicky, this is kind of clunky world building, but pretty much every piece of fiction has stuff like this, and it doesn't really bother me, so eh. Also, Tanjiro recognizes that his grandma used to say similar things, so it's not new information to him, which is actually a good bit of world building to balance that out. The next morning, Tanjiro heads back home, only to find his family slaughtered, save his little sister Nezuko, and now we're caught up to the cold open. While traveling along, Nezuko starts convulsing, knocking the two of them off a nearby cliffside. After Tanjiro gets to his feet, Nezuko attacks him, trying to bite him. It seems she's turned into a demon. After a bit of a struggle, Tanjiro, tears streaming from his eyes, begs his sister to resist becoming a demon, and she starts to tear up as well. Soon after all of these emotions have started happening, a mysterious warrior in a very unfashionable outfit appears, and a conflict of both words and weapons begins. This warrior is Giyu Tomioka, one of the titular demon slayers, and wouldn't you know it, he would very much like to slay this particular demon. Giyu views everything he's doing to Tanjiro and Nezuko, as cruel as it may seem, as a kindness towards them. Demons are super fucking dangerous and have no mercy for humans. Eventually, during this encounter, Nezuko moves to defend her brother, and Giyu realizes that there might actually be something different about her compared to other demons. Whether Giyu is impressed, intrigued, or sympathetic, he tells Tanjiro to seek out an old man named Urokodaki. He also, gifts Nezuko with a gag made of bamboo, hopefully to help her not eat humans. Turns out demons die in the sunlight, another helpful tip from Giyu, so Tanjiro constructs a wooden basket to carry Nezuko in. Or, well, insists on paying for one that was falling apart and then repairing it himself, because again, he's a good boy. After traveling for a bit, Nezuko and Tanjiro come under attack by a demon, and I'm going to stop being so detailed so you can experience all of these delicious moments of character development for yourself. What I will delve into a bit is that once Urokodaki begins training Tanjiro, he teaches him a technique called total concentration breathing, the first of many forms of special breathing technique. Outside of demons having crazy powers because they're fucking demons, this is the requisite source of crazy shonen action powers for most of the human combatants. At first, the technique just makes Tanjiro stronger and faster and all of that sort of stuff, but it eventually allows him to do hyper-stylish, water-themed, crazy anime bullshit, and it's really fucking cool. After about 2 years of training, it's only like 2 episodes that cover the whole bit with Urokodaki, don't worry, Tanjiro goes off to take the test to become a demon slayer. Again, don't want to give away all of the rather gory details, but I found it an engaging watch beginning to end. If you watch up through the test and its aftermath, that'd be 5 episodes, you'll have a pretty good idea of what the show will entail, but there's a few narrative aspects that aren't super evident early on, along with a few main characters who don't get introduced until a bit later on down the line. Obviously, we've already met Nezuko, but I want to take this opportunity to gush about how much I love her and how well she's been treated as a character. At least so far, I'm anime only. She's absolutely adorable outside of combat. Watching her do her super cute thing, I genuinely got some of the same wholesome, heart-swelling feelings that I got from Slice of Life series, like Dragon Maid and Is the Order a Rabbit. It's also an unfortunately uncommon experience to see characters who don't speak communicating through other means in fiction. It's refreshing, and while it's not a direct representation of anything in real life, it's still nice to see on screen. When it's go time, she's treated just like one of the other main characters. She's genuinely badass and rips and tears into demons with savage, bloody ferocity. It's also nice to have a woman who's just as competent at the combat as the men as one of the leads of a shounen action series, especially one that doesn't have any perverted, objectifying bullshit in it. Tanjiro is the main character, but Nezuko is absolutely a lead as well, and gets plenty of screen time and active plot participation. Tanjiro does initially set out to defend his sister, and up through the test, Nezuko isn't actively helping too often, but ultimately they wind up defending each other. They more often than not fight together against whatever demonic baddie is causing trouble. Also, I hate that I need to mention this, but because of certain unfortunate trends in Japanese media, I feel obligated to mention that, as far as I know, there is no romantic attraction whatsoever between Nezuko and Tanjiro. Their love is strictly familial. The character I presume to be the series villain, considering he is apparently the only being who can turn humans into demons, isn't introduced in those early episodes either. It's hard to judge him entirely now because the anime is so early in the grand scheme of the plot, but from what I've seen of Muzan Kibutsuji, he is terrifying, badass, and holds a very interesting place in the setting. When we first meet him, he's masquerading as a human father, and seems to have a human family that he might actually care about? Like, obviously he's still a piece of shit that's responsible for the deaths of countless innocents, including most of Tanjiro and Nezuko's family, but it's still interesting to see a shonen action villain with layers of complexity going on that seemingly aren't just differing flavors of ridiculously evil. Wouldn't you know it, Kibutsuji happens to have a veritable army of once human, now demonic minions at his disposal. It turns out that the key to a cure for Nezuko may come from analyzing the blood of other demons that were turned by Kibutsuji, and because Kibutsuji's blood can make existing demons even stronger, the stronger the demon slain, the more our heroes might be able to learn about a possible cure. I already really liked Tanjiro and Nezuko's motivation to find a way to return her humanity. It's a deeply personal goal that quickly establishes stakes, and once we learn a bit more, gives them both a very good, understandable, natural reason to get involved in the grander conflict playing out between demons and demon slayers. While their unique situation, ultimately a demon slayer and a demon traveling and fighting together, is one that sets them apart from everyone else involved in this conflict without making either of them some mythical chosen one or otherwise handing them completely overpowered abilities. They need to work for their victories, are probably in over their heads, are very motivated to get what they want, are outsiders stepping into a new world, and have prejudice working against them. It's ultimately a few very simple to understand core concepts that work incredibly well together to drive the narrative forward in a personal and engaging way. There are two other main characters that don't really join up with Tanjiro until a bit under halfway through the first season. We first meet Zenitsu Agatsuma in the aftermath of the test to become a demon slayer, looking incredibly traumatized, which, hey, fair enough. I initially really didn't like Zenitsu, at all, because Tanjiro next meets him on the road, on his knees, desperately begging a woman to marry him while claiming that he's soon going to die. Like, he's holding on to her and sobbing, and she clearly wants no part of him. I'm not going to pretend that this is nearly as bad as most anime. A shittier show would have had him actively perving on her, but it did make me a bit uncomfortable. This initial scene is supposed to make Zenitsu seem pathetic and very much outside of what you would expect a demon slayer to be like. I think it goes a bit too far. It's incredibly over the top. It turns out to be a bit of a misunderstanding. Zenitsu interpreted her helping him while he was injured as her having feelings for him, which was very much not the case. She was just showing a basic level of human affection, dude. Calm down. I found this to be way too uncomfortably familiar to what happens to women in real life to really find it humorous. When the misunderstanding is cleared up, he ultimately does calm down in that respect. After an apparently funny to someone slapping spree from the woman, he He's still completely terrified of the fact that he needs to fight demons and is very, very convinced that he's going to die on his next job. Tanjiro seems to initially find him pathetic and or repulsive due to how he's acting, especially in regards to the woman, "Thank you for drinking your respect women juice, Tanjiro." Tanjiro's reaction and the fact that Zenitsu does chill out at least a bit over time made me feel better about the character overall. The protagonist not being okay with that when the protagonist up to this point has been a genuinely good person is a good sign that the author doesn't condone Zenitsu's actions and doesn't expect the audience to find how he was treating her as anything other than disgraceful and comedic. Again, for me, the comedy failed and left a bad taste in my mouth initially, but I did eventually come to enjoy the character. He ultimately does have more going on than just being terrified comedic relief all the time. Insofar as his motivations, he doesn't really go much further with other women than thinking they're beautiful. His character being so afraid most of the time does lead to some quality character development moments, and when shit goes down, he does actually help fight demons or protect people. His power, once you discover its full extent, is cool and flashy, but I feel like that it takes away a lot of his agency. Basically, he falls asleep and then becomes a super badass with lightning powers that pretty much utterly destroy his foes. What's actually happening is better explained later on, and that explanation does make him a more interesting character to me. Basically, I hope it's going to go in a somewhat specific direction in the long term of him attempting to master his latent ability, because going into automatic sleepy mode won't be enough to deal with the increasing strength of his foes forever, but I don't actually know if that's going to happen. So yeah, Zenitsu is a character who I think has potential to go in an interesting direction, but he has an introduction that I really don't like, and there's no guarantee that that potential will be realized, so for now at least, he's definitely my least favorite character, though I will admit that I did occasionally chuckle at his freakouts. Finally, there's Inosuke Hashibira. Inosuke is a buff boy who wears a boar head over his own head. Yes, he's human under there. Tanjiro and Zenitsu meet him after arriving at their destination together, and he's, a bit abrasive. See, Inosuke is obsessed with fighting and is convinced that he's the strongest, to the point that he challenges pretty much everyone he comes across to a fight, regardless of context, including Tanjiro. And to start at least, he pretty much just rushes directly into combat against demons, tactics be damned. He fights using beast breathing techniques, which imitate wild animals, and are generally focused on simple, overwhelming strength, though there are a few more interesting ones. Also, he's very pretty under the boar head, and I find it funny that a character that is so aggressive, and for lack of a better description, non-protagonist-like, shares a voice actor with Kirito from Sword Art Online. Massive respect to the range on Yoshitsugu Matsuoka. Inosuke probably has my favorite character development arc in the first season, and he's my second favorite character after Nezuko. Over the course of the first season, he starts to actually care about other people by forming a friendship with Tanjiro and Zenitsu. Seeing someone go from not really understanding other people in the slightest to having genuine bonds with them is really wholesome and sweet to watch. Also, there's this really adorable aspect where Inosuke's aggression gets disarmed by Tanjiro's kindness. It's also kind of tragic because it's basically Inosuke not knowing how to process someone being kind to him and getting embarrassed and shutting down as a result. These interactions absolutely made me ship Tanjiro and Inosuke, by the way. In combat, Inosuke's growth and development relies heavily on him suppressing the urge to rush recklessly in and actually start thinking about how to come out on top of encounters, which I found to be a fun process to watch. The character and demon designs are very hit or miss for me. There's a few characters that I just think look dumb, but all of the main characters are solid. Nezuko is so cute, and most of the demons are horrifying and or really fucking cool. Though even with those designs I'm not super fond of, the art style does look distinct from that generic anime look that so many shows use now, which I always appreciate. So as for the actual action scenes, they are simply among the best I have ever seen. Ufotable has already proved to me that they're absolutely astounding at animating action scenes with the Fate series. Demon Slayer was originally a manga series, so they have more to actually adapt in the action respect, but that doesn't change how astounding their work is. There are some instances where the animation quality dips a bit, awful 3D models are used occasionally, usually outside of combat, and there's some comedy bits that seem to only use a few frames, but when it's fucking go time, the animation becomes breathtakingly beautiful and awesome. And in addition to the usual Ufotable amazingness, there's an added layer of style on top of that. Many of the breath techniques used by various Demon Slayers seems like they're animated in a different art style. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly how this is achieved, but I do know that it makes these fights complete visual candy. The other excellently executed aspect of this is more of a writing than a visual thing. In action anime, I generally think of action in two broad categories. Pretty much every action series has elements of both at various parts, but on the most basic of levels, most things at the very least lean one way or the other. On one side is the style over substance combat, where power levels and emotions are all you need to win. Early sword art and Dragon Ball Z usually fall firmly into this category, and it's incredibly common for shonen action series in general. While the other extreme is clever combat, where tactics and clever techniques are what matter. My Hero Academia and JoJo usually typify this. Demon Slayer absolutely does both, though I think it leans a bit more towards the latter. I think it does both very well. When it's style over substance, the spectacle is a blast to watch, and it always leads to some element of world building or characterization, as long as the final big bad evil guy isn't defeated by this, unless the show is basically only displayed style over substance, or it's a series less about the action and more about the characters or theme, then I'm good. When it's clever combat, Demon Slayer is always incredibly well thought out and interesting. These are the moments in action anime that I tend to enjoy the most. A spectacle is fun, and I can enjoy it, but clever action scenes done right actively make me care more about the characters and narrative. The stakes feel more legitimate, and it doesn't feel like a character won because the story said they had to win, but that the characters are earning their victories. The abilities of the foes that Tanjiro and friends need to deal with are highly varied, and that variety comes across with how they have to deal with the problem. It's not quite as crazy as JoJo gets with this, because honestly, what the fuck could be, but it is genuinely among the series with the most unique power sets to me. Good core ideas written well that are animated beautifully. I legitimately cannot think of anything else I would want from the action in a series. It's fucking great. Samurai usually just aren't my thing. It's an aesthetic that I generally don't care for. There are some exceptions, of course, especially when the look is mixed with some other theme. Samurai Jack is very far from a traditional samurai story, for example. Point is, I've never gone to check something out based on samurai being involved specifically, and Demon Slayers are basically samurai with special powers, so on that theme from me. But I do like dark fantasy, which this series absolutely has in spades, with a bit of horror added in for good measure. Seriously, some of those demons are genuinely terrifying. I know that when people say fantasy, it tends to evoke the idea of knights and dragons and all that, but fantasy and dark fantasy don't need to be focused on Western cultures. Diversity in fiction is good. Anyways, dark fantasy. I tend to like the genre when executed well because narratives with stakes are more engaging to me. The threat of death isn't the only way to establish stakes, but it is a reliable one, and for an action series, one that's generally effective. Do I think it likely that the main characters will die in this series? Probably not, but the brutality happening around, and very often to them, makes it seem more likely than in, say, Dragon Ball Z. Demon Slayer is bloody and violent and brutal. Demons are horrific and cruel. They make existing in this setting a generally miserable prospect. A lot of innocent people die because of them, like, pretty much all the time. Living here would suck. In many ways, the series reminded me of my younger days of staying up to watch 2 a.m. broadcasts of Inuyasha, though it's far less episodic, and so far there haven't been fights over MacGuffin pieces. I really should rewatch Inuyasha sometime. I don't think I ever actually finished it. Anyways, when particularly important or special demons are killed, we're given a look into who they were before they became demons by way of a flashback. These are, as far as I know, not actually given to any of the characters, making their placement kind of strange, but it does a lot for world building and provides a bit of tragic context to these antagonists. I definitely cried from quite a few of these, actually. Like they were still super evil and needed to be stopped, but it really shows how at least some of these demons were once innocent humans who were twisted and corrupted by Kibitsuji. It's a really nice way to relate everything that's been happening directly to our characters to the larger narrative. On that note, dark fantasy can be a bit overwhelming in its despair. Most dark narratives like this have some form of levity to balance out all the edge. Even Berserk has Puck, though personally I don't think having a dedicated comic relief character is always the best way to go about it. There's definitely some comedic relief here, for better or for worse. Fun shenanigans between our main characters are mostly enjoyable. Zenitsu on his own, especially that initial introduction to him, could be grating, but I think when he's interacting with the others he has some particularly enjoyable bits. Inosuke can also go full aggro mode for comedic effect, which I found to be funny. What's most important is that the creators know how to turn the funny bits off so serious narrative or character moments can take place. Nothing could kill the impact of a tragic or dark moment faster than some wacky shenanigans coming into focus right after them. I never had this problem with Demon Slayer, so the comedic bits didn't bother me, and were often pretty fun. The only thing I found consistently grating is that Demon Slayers are given, like, crow messenger things that fly in and tell them about their next assignment. The voice for these is super screechy, and I found my head hurting even from brief scenes with them. Thankfully, they don't show up too often. The soundtrack is fucking astounding as far as I'm concerned. I've never really considered myself particularly knowledgeable about music, so forgive me for not being able to do a particularly deep delve on this. To me, it sounds like a mixture of traditional Japanese music with more modern symphonic arrangements. There's also quite a bit of chanting and, like, wailing? It's a unique sound that I liked quite a lot, and comes to us by way of two composers. First and foremost, the amazing Yuki Kaijura. She composed two of my favorite anime soundtracks of all time, Madoka Magica and Dot Hack Sign, as well as Go Shina, who composed for Tekken and Ace Combat, two game series with excellent soundtracks. So I guess it's not really surprising that I love the music here. Like many mangaka, the creator of Demon Slayer chooses to remain anonymous, going by the pen name Koyoharu Gotoge. They even keep their gender anonymous, and apparently they don't like being referred to by any gendered pronouns. As far as I know, they haven't made public whether they're non-binary or something else, but regardless, good for them. Also, they use an adorable alligator with glasses for their profile picture thing, which is just delightful. The first season is 26 episodes. It does take its time to get the plot really going, but even the early stuff is enjoyable to watch as far as I'm concerned, and I actually quite like that it takes its time and doesn't rush through plot beats. I'd say get through the Demon Slayer test, at least before judging if you want to continue, so the first 5 episodes. The upcoming movie is a part of the main narrative and is apparently incredibly important, so make sure you watch that before going on to season 2, which will probably happen because this series seems to be pretty popular. Ultimately, Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba is a rather simple show. Aside from the cool visuals on the powers, there's not really anything in this series you can't find in other series, but nearly everything that this show does, it does extremely well, and it ties it all together in a satisfying way. If you like shounen action, like, at all, you should absolutely check this series out. This has been Kalice, thanks for watching. You can like the video, subscribe, or share this video around if you enjoyed it and want to. My Patreon exists if you'd like to support me. There's neat bonuses like my scripts and raw recording sessions, so feel free to go look at that. Speaking of, big thanks to all of my current patrons, like Ash. Keep loving what you love, and I'll see you next time with something else.